Very, very good topics. I like talking about this. Are NFL teams tanking, and
Yes.
should the draft be changed? I'll let you
Yeah.
speak first on this.
So I was just thinking, I mean, a lot of people have been thinking the same thing about how, like, the draft it's not perfect, the worst team picks first. And ideally that would mean that they would get better the next year. But like for a long time, it's just been like the same bad teams selecting really good college players. And then those guys just not panning out in some cases of no fault of their own because they're just within a bad organization with a flailing coach and no roster around them and no real support. So, a lot of people are floating around the idea of like tanking for Caleb Williams, who I don't think is the best quarterback in college right now.
Who
Um,
is?
I think Drake May is, dude. Honestly, he just
Mitch
I
Trubisky
get
2.0?
I get the whole Caleb Williams, like he can scramble and make these cool ass plays, but that doesn't really happen in the NFL because these guys are way more disciplined. He played up against a really good defense in Notre Dame and he couldn't do any of that. That's an NFL experience right there. You don't see a lot of guys scrambling around doing all these things and making a long throw. Like the guys who've done that, Rodgers, Mahomes, like, yeah, they end up being really, really good, but like that, how many other guys got selected with the same traits who have not panned out? You know what I mean? That's why I'm a little. I have a little pause for Caleb Williams where I don't really have it for Drake May, and then there's another guy. What's the guy from Washington State? Penix.
Ooh, Michael Penix
I
Jr. He's my
watched him,
Heisman pick.
dude. Man, I watched him this past weekend. I didn't see the whole game, but he was really impressive. If that's the third guy that everyone's like unanimously saying is QB3, so be it. Let him drop to the Vikings. Like I would take that guy. I would take any of them in a heartbeat. But I don't. I think May might be number one, then Williams, and then Penix. But I would take Penix for sure.
I mean, you're not alone. You're not alone in the May pick. Like, that's not a controversial pick, Tom.
No,
Pick
no,
because May is he had a very good freshman year.
yeah,
He's having a decent sophomore year, and he has that stature that's a good prospect. Like Lawrence's example, he's a good like
yes,
typical stature. Like what's his face? Carson Wentz. He had that
Mhm.
quarterback stature, and and he's and I'm sure there's other ways to analyze these kids to figure if they're going to make it or not. But however, it's really a flip of a coin sometimes. Um, Caleb Williams, he's interesting because he's in a style of play. Lincoln Riley, if you know who that is,
Mhm.
he's the head coach. He's also the head coach at Oklahoma, where he has produced multiple Heisman winners, such as Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield. It's the style of play that really elevates these quarterbacks that he works
Yeah.
with because it's a plug and play system to where it's simplified for them to really make the big plays and to really have a high power offense, whether it's running the game, running the ball, or it's throwing it deep to some stud 5-star receiver. And so that's kind of I'm not going to say that those guys are nobodies and it was just like a smoke and mirrors. But I'm
Mhm.
saying is like the transition from that style to an NFL style is hard for these kids that are used to that because like when you're in college, you do a lot of shotgun play action,
Right.
but then when you're in the NFL, you do a little bit more of like under center. So like that's an example where like that's something they're not used to, but now they have to get used to it.
Yeah.
It's just to me, it's not about what the numbers say. It's how well they can adapt to the style of play. That's what's going to determine your success in the NFL. And
Absolutely.
to kind of get back on topic about if teams are tanking, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like
It seems that way.
it does seem that way. And then, I mean, honestly, it makes sense. Like there's nothing that restricts them. Make sure if they get caught in an investigation, they get like a fine and a slap of
Right.
wrist and they lose a pick or two. But like the NBA, I like how they do it to
I was going to
where
bring that up. Yep.
yeah, that's exactly. I've been telling people this all the time.
Yeah.
It's like NBA. Like if you are the worst player in the team, worst team in the league, you're not going to be guaranteed the number one pick. You're just going to be guaranteed a higher probability of getting number one overall pick. And I feel like that's a way to minimize the tanking because it's like I could lose every game this season and I'm not guaranteed the first pick for this generational prospect that I'm looking for, like a Victor Wimbayama. So that kind of regulates it a little bit. Because I just can't imagine like you spend your high school career, your college career grinding and taking on the top country teams in the country, and you set, you win a Heisman or you win best wide receiver of the year or best defensive player of the year, and your reward is you're going to the fucking Arizona Cardinals.
Exactly. That's the big fear. Like the Cardinals were the biggest fear. Like they're a really, really bad organization. Like they were just graded in the offseason as like they did like some sort of player survey where they got an F- for like on a grade scale. Like it was the worst across the board. And I think Caleb Williams' dad went out and said something like, if the Cardinals are the number one team, Caleb's just going to stay and play another year at USC. And that's like a big fear for the NFL. Like, hey, if we're not able to like facilitate some of these guys, like they might just stay because some of them stand to make more money in college on those NIL deals. And so what's the point of going? Like the whole NFL thing is the payday. But if they're making good amount of money in college and they're still able to play with their friends and stuff, like why leave that? Why leave it for one more year? And I mean, the whole lottery system, it also benefits like the player himself, who's going to be not forced to be on the worst team in the NFL. He could be on like the 13th worst team or something, who's actually pretty average, and maybe he's the final piece that they've been waiting for. I don't know, but it at least gives those guys a little bit more of an option, even though they're still selected. They don't get to pick their team. It still gives them like the option to be like, all right, I could be with like a Cleveland Browns or something like that with a great defense. I don't have to do it all on my own. Where with the Cardinals, you're probably going to have to do it all on your own. They have no one around them.
Yeah, maybe the Cardinals is a bad example because they're not as worse as I thought they're going to be, but still, it's not a great team to go to, and it's difficult to go play over there. But it's it's just a better way to kind of like hold teams more accountable in terms of how they're going about the business of football. Because if you're fucking losing by 40 plus points, that's not going to hurt your record. It's going to hurt the ratings. Like people are going to turn the game off. They're going to watch something else, whether it's another football game or another program, and the NFL loses money. They want to keep these games closed. That's why people watch these games. I've had my dad example. My dad asked my dad, "Hey, do you watch college football?" I'm like, "No, those guys are amateurs, and the games are always super high scoring or super there's differences in like it's a blowout game. Like it happens more often for college versus NFL." It's true. Like college football, it's more unpredictable. You'll see more blowout games in that league versus the NFL because they're professionals and they keep it close because the talent and skill level is more apples to apples.
Mm-hmm.
And if you tanking, you're not going to look like a professional, and then it's just going to like, why the fuck are we watching this game?
Exactly. Like, you just like you want to be able to both like offer some of these guys or offer audiences like just a better viewing platter. Like you don't have to watch the worst teams with the worst players play all the time. Like there's going to be some gems in there. Every matchup could be really competitive. I feel like the NFL in general, a lot of teams have just been like extra bad this year. There's a couple of really good teams, and then there's very few mediocre, and then everyone else is just really below average. Like no one looks that scary out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just look at Eli Manning, for example. He almost went to the Chargers, and it was the same situation.
Right.
And where like I'm not playing for the Chargers, like he pretty much did a holdout, and he didn't go to the Chargers. He went to the Giants. Like, sure, I guarantee at the time people are complaining about, oh, this guy is not a good. He's not a true hard worker, blah blah blah, this and that. But people forget about that one now that he has 2 Super Bowls, and it's probably gonna be the Hall of Fame. And look, who also got he got picked up instead of Eli Manning? Philip Rivers.
Yep.
And I'm not saying Philip Rivers regrets his choice of going to the Chargers, but like it kind of puts in perspective. Like if the Chargers didn't pick me, I might have gotten picking up by the Giants or another team and have a Super Bowl.
You might, you might have. Who do you think is better? Who had a better career? I'd probably say, without the Super Bowls, Philip Rivers had the better career. But dude, the Chargers could never get it done. Where the Giants always had that really good defense, so they were able to get it done against the best team too. So I mean, it is weird. It's weird that no one else has gone out and been like, hey, I don't want to play for this team. Like when Deshaun Watson came in and he had to play for the Texans, like that would have been a clear case of I don't want to play for this team. Like they are so bad. I'm probably just going to get hurt playing. He ended up elevating them to a playoff status team for a short time, but like,
yeah, and I think that's what get these players to not be problem players or problem draftees, to where like, oh, so and so did it. Joe Burrow took the Bengals to the Super Bowl. I could take a shitty team to the Super Bowl too.
Yeah.
Like look, those kind of stories give them hope that it's not, there's, the grass is green on the other side, or like there's always a chance that I could be the man that saved the city by taking the team to the promised land. So there's always that glimmer of hope of why they don't hold out. But like, I'm sure there are guys that think, I don't want to go to these teams, but they're not going to sit because they don't want the negative attention on, especially on draft day. Like if you're saying, I don't want to do this, like, oh, I don't want this guy either. Like the other teams are going to be questioning him too.
Absolutely. Because I think that's one of the questions. I think when they do those pre-draft interviews, I think they ask them sometimes, like, are there any teams that, you would really want to play for and stuff like that? And I think a lot of players are smart. They just dance around it like, oh, I just want whatever opportunity. Of course, there's probably some teams they want to play for. But if they, like you said, if they said that, everyone's going to give them a side eye. Like, what do you mean by that? Like, so you wouldn't want to play for this team or that team? Like, what if you do end up playing for that team? Then what? It's a weird situation. If I was someone who's going to be a superstar and stuff, I mean, I would be thinking about my future totally, but you'd have to make some compromises for sure.
Exactly. Can you imagine, like in corporate America, they have like drafts or trades?
Yeah.
Like a company goes on bankruptcy and they get the first overall pick for the next year's company draft, like corporate draft.
Yeah.
They get this Harvard business law student after they file for bankruptcy.
Yeah, and he's supposed to just turn the whole company around. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like what it is. I mean, sometimes that's what you're asking a 20, 21-year-old kid to do, is like, oh, you gotta turn this whole thing around pretty much by yourself.
Oh, brother, it's like kid came in by beer yet, but he has to change an organization, a multi-million-dollar organization.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine just chilling at home? I get a message in my box, hey man, we just trade you to Best Buy, so pack your things.
Yeah, just pack up your shit. It's like, you get anything in return? Like some TVs.
Some TVs, like Geek Squad membership. Man, that must suck for like families too. Like you build this community, or you become familiar with this community that your husband plays for, and then the next day he just gets traded. Now you have to leave in like 2 days.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I feel like I never want to buy a house if that were the case. It's like so much work.
The trade market, the way it works in like the NFL, I read something about how the transition is so quick. Like once you're traded, that same day, you have to get on a plane and start moving over there right away. Like you have to pack your things and move right away. Like you have especially in the NFL, because it's such a week by week thing, you have to go super fast through it. Where I'm sure it's not the case for like MLB and NBA, but those are totally different scenarios and totally different seasons. It's wild, man. Like I wouldn't want to be young and having to get traded like that and just pack up everything and move. Like you got to leave everyone behind. That would suck.
Yeah, it'd be hard for the kids, especially.
Yeah.